Why do you coach? Welcome to the Nick Anthony Show. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Nick.
Hey, Nick, how you doing today?
I'm really good today, Ant.
Why
really excited.
Why is that?
Well, we have a special guest with us today. Chris Bates is here, good friend of mine. Chris is the current head coach at St. Andrew's School in Middletown, Delaware, and he's the head coach of the PLL Utah Archers.
That's a professional team.
That's a professional, hence the P for PLL. And
Premier.
Yeah.
Professional.
Okay.
Correct. I'm sorry. That's good.
Former head coach at Drexel with me years ago, and in Princeton. He's also been a high school coach prior to St. Andrews. Accomplished player. I guess overall, you're with your coaching world championships. You are a 5-time world champion, 3 as a player, indoor, right? And then 2 outdoor as a head coach recently in 23, 24. Am I right on that?
Correct.
Yeah. So very accomplished coach, excited for Chris to share his wisdom, his lessons, and just it's someone I admire for a lot of things that hopefully we'll get into. But just awesome head coach, awesome person. So
that's an amazing spectrum of skills that you must have to coach high school, college, and pros. That's amazing. So I'm going to start with the question, why do you coach?
Well, first, nice to be here, gentlemen. I'm honored to spend some time and share some thoughts. So it's fun to just think about, in preparation, thinking about, why you're here and where you come from. So from a coaching standpoint, for me, graduating college, I did sort of the 20s bump around and try to figure out who I am and where I'm going to, sort of be best served. And every one of my sort of natural next steps in the 20s had sort of this linear progression that made sense. And every no to a job or an experience got me closer, I think. So both my parents are public school educators. So I grew up in an environment where education was valued. And, just for me, it was early on a way to sort of pay the bills in some regard, but like every life circumstance I had, lacrosse was part of it in sort of this serendipitous way. Coached at Archbishop Ryan in 1992, just as a job. I saw an ad, I was doing some temp job, and I'm like, let me try to coach. Like, let me see if I like this. And to this day, I'm in touch with guys from Archbishop Ryan. But everything I did just was around the game, and had the opportunity at Drexel as a part-time coach, and just realized that I could be pretty good at it. I thought, just because I'm competitive by nature, it's kind of who I am. I can't help it. I'm wired that way. But then also just thinking through the impact I could have, that to me was going to be good life's work. And building those relationships. And like I said, I thought I had been a part of good teams and bad teams. And I just, building team culture and, competing, but then also, what better profession? I have lifelong relationships with guys I've coached. Like that's as much a prize. And, so it's the old adage, like, I don't consider it work. Like, for me to be a coach is natural. It's a labor of love in terms of the learning process and the growing process. But and the game's been good to me. I'm a lacrosse guy through and through. I can't help it.
Right.
But it's just it's been a good fit.
Yeah, one thing over the time I'd say I've learned is you're a coach of principle, a man of principles. And values, like high values, obviously, and talk about how those values are intertwined in your coaching style, philosophy?
I think I've learned as a coach that you have to be yourself. And if you're a good coach, your team should reflect your values. Otherwise, you're faking it in some regard. And you have to do it your own way. And that's, something I've learned. You got to find your own voice. But your own value system is what you live and what you preach. And sometimes it gets you in trouble, as you well know. But, sometimes, that is sort of the difference maker in terms of, being real to your team and the people that you're trying to, motivate.
Yeah.
So, to me, they're one and the same. Your value system should be, and it depends on where you are and what you dial up and dial down, but you have to be true to yourself. And I think your teams, if they're good, will reflect that.
Yeah. And do you think that authenticity is kind of the key to what you've been able to accomplish? I mean, and then when did you figure that out?
It took time. Early on, it might have been my way or the highway, and I've learned that you have to evolve that, certainly. But I think that's just who I am, and I learned that. I remember my mom being a teacher. I had my mom as a teacher in 9th grade, and the first day, she set the tone in terms of her classroom expectations, and did it early, and that's a lesson that will stand with me. So I'm running a classroom every day in some regard. And if you set, what's expected and have the accountability in place, then off you go. Then that stuff's taken care of in some regard, and you can't compromise on your values there, in my view. And each kid's different and each team's different. But then if that stuff's kind of set, then I feel like then it allows you to really grow and explore and have fun with it, which is what I've tried to evolve to.
Do you remember back in 9th grade, what was the tone that your mother set?
Tough but firm, but fun as like my mom was one of the best teachers I've had.
And
She was a Spanish teacher in John Jay Middle School, and we made the decision. I had the opportunity to have her as a teacher and have this other guy who was a teacher who was just known to be not great.
Okay.
So, we looked at each other and said, hey, can we do this? And we could. And, like to this day, like I take lessons from how she established control of a classroom to start and wouldn't compromise, but had so much fun with her students.
Right.
And it was, to me, something I'll always remember and cherish. But as a professional, I learned that and have distinct memories of it.
So do you do that do you follow her model then at the beginning of every season, or do you do it more often than that? How do you?
As much as needed. Yesterday, I had my first St. Andrews interest meeting, and when a guy's a minute late, I'm like, "You're a minute late." That kid knows now that time and being on time is important. That's the first interaction he's ever had with me. You set that tone, and I think from there, kids and players want structure. I just have believed that. Like
Actions have consequences.
I'm a firm believer in creativity on the field and making decisions, and I'm, as a coach, I promote that. But there's also the non-negotiables of who we are and how we go about, and those community norms are important on a team.
So the consequence for him being a minute late was just you calling him out, basically. You didn't kick him out of the room.
He knew, right? He knew, and it's the same thing. I'm a thirds team. So the worst basketball players on campus right now, I'm the assistant coach on this team. It's pure comedy. I suited up yesterday and played. We can talk about that later. But, and the head baseball coach is the head coach. And these kids don't realize what they have in terms of really good coaching in front of them. But another point, like kid missed the line. It's the oldest thing in the book. He missed touching the line on a down back at a suicide. And coach, he brought him in. I'm like, all right, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing here. Even with these kids who are never, there's not an NBA, there may be an NBA fan in the group.
So that's clear education, right? I mean,
right. That's a life lesson.
Yeah. I mean, it's accountability. It's the team, culture, but it's, I mean, your parents were obviously, as you said, educators, but that's what you do. I mean, that's what you do as a coach. I love that about you is just to keep it simple. It's not about you, right? I mean, like when you're saying you have to touch the line or you're a minute late, that's not personal. It's not you, they're disrespecting you or, and I've had some of those conversations really recently with some coaches. So I guess talk about why they believe that, or how do you convey that other than authenticity? Is there a way that you're conscious of where you're like, you know what, obviously calling them out in the moment, but do you have a structure to that? Do you think about that, or is it just innate on who you are?
I mean, I would say I think it comes with experience to know when and where. And probably early on as a coach, it was black and white, and now I
remember that.
Yeah, and and you've learned, and some of that's good, and some of that causes friction. But at the same point, I think as you evolve, you sort of pick and choose. So I think you have core values, right? Like I can tell you what our St. Andrews core values are. We have a thing called badge, right?
Your team or the school?
My team.
Okay.
My team. So we talked about it even yesterday. Like it just sort of happened. If it's going to work, your teams need to believe in it and have input in it.
Yeah.
So, in a small Delaware high school lacrosse, like we've created something that I think will be lasting in terms of its badge, its brotherhood, accountability, discipline, grit, and excellence.
Okay. And then how often will you talk about that? Throughout the year?
As often as you need to.
Okay.
It's just a reminder. It's just a foundation. And, and it doesn't have to always be a team thing. It can be an individual conversation with a kid. Like, hey, man, this is what we believe in. This is what we talked about. This is, you bought into this. You sort of signed this contract.
Yeah.
You decided to be here. This is what it means to be here.
Oh, in essence, holding them accountable for things that they've said that they want to be.
Exactly.
So how did you do that? You did that with the coaches first and then the players? You did it right with the players?
Had it sat in a locker room and said, who do we want to be? What's important to us? Get in groups. Your class needs to come up on the whiteboard. So then each value then had examples. And then the next step for us was, what can go wrong? How is this going to look when it doesn't go well? Let's talk about that now.
Okay.
When somebody is late, what's that going to look like? So it's not a shock that I'm making you rotten or whatever it's understood that like there's now an acknowledgement that this is not going to be perfect, or there's going to be moments where we have to make, some discussion around what's happening.
Right.
When it doesn't spin right or something's going wrong, like let's think of that ahead of time.
Right.
And if kids can understand that, like they know each other better, they'll look at a kid and be like, he's going to be late.
Yeah.
Or he's not going to touch the line, or he's, so it's... Keep pointing. Sorry.
We'll be right back to the Nick Anthony Show.
Today's show is brought to you by Rio the Film, available for free on YouTube. Access the documentary at www.riothefilm.com. That is RIOthefilm.com. Watch the inspiring true story of swimming the most iconic marathon swims in South America. www.riothefilm.com.
Welcome back to the Nick Anthony Show.
But I mean, from Anthony, like, as he's saying that, is there some piece of you that is thinking like that's what businesses do with a strategic plan?
Actually,
right?
I was going back to our goal setting show, where we talked about how goal setting sounds easy, but it takes a lot of time.
Yep.
And what Chris just described is something that he or his coaches could have came up with badge, right, in isolation, but he did it the long way.
Yep.
Right? We also talked about how the shortest distance between two people is never a straight line.
Yep.
It's always a curvy long line. He took the curvy long line, and then he got buy-in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
love that. I mean, when you think about it, I think that is a huge lesson. Now, I will say, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that's probably something you evolved in too, right?
No doubt.
Without 2004, 5, that was not in your wheelhouse per se.
Maybe not. I mean, I've always tried to empower. I remember being at Drexel in the locker room, and, if we're going to meet, and the reason we set up the locker room the way we did was I wanted everybody to, like, it was important to me. I want everybody to be looking at each other so that there is that accountability. I can look across the room and get eyes with somebody. It's not me in front. And in those discussions, I'm part of the circle as best I can. But I remember even back then saying, like, our first line in the book, I said, everybody get out, everybody's getting out their 3-ring binder. I'm like, write this, I am a leader.
Yeah.
And it just says to every single person right then, like, okay, I have value. Like, I'm expected to pull my weight here. I'm expected to own this. upperclassmen always have more experience. They can articulate things better, all that. But if a young guy is drafting in that right away and understands that, I think it's strong. But yeah, that it takes time. But I think there were seeds of things that carry forward.
Do you think some of that time? Because I have this theory. I don't know if it's a theory, but just talking to some coaches, that it's the insecurity of coaches early in your career, right? You're pretending to be a head coach. That when you become a head coach or early in your career, I got to establish authority, and then once you get confident, then you become what we like to say is unconsciously competent, and so you're not thinking about it, and you know it, and then it's like, hey, my stuff works, or and not that that's a conscious thought, it's an unconscious thought, but that allows you to do certain things where it's like, no, agree?
Totally.
I mean, okay.
Yeah, I think as a young coach, like we've all been there in business where you're faking it till you make it to some degree, but there's also that insecurity or lack of confidence, and Seg's talked about it. It was great.
Yeah.
Like just the default to this, it's like that's not good.
Yeah,
it's usually just not a good. There are times for that, but I think as young coaches, and it's mastering the strategy in the game and teaching what you need to teach and bring it to kids in a way that they can learn it. But it's also those intangibles of here's how we do what we do, and getting the buy-in's a much better way than saying this is how we do it.
Yeah.
I have to translate real quick. Sorry.
Translate?
Yeah. Segs is Joe Seglia, one of our other guests. These guys know. So
sorry.
It took me a little while, so probably might take our audience a little bit to figure out who you guys were talking about when you say Segs. But I get it now.
Yeah.
So, anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No.
Fair. Sorry.
No. So, I mean, great example with your, with St. Andrews. How about the Archers? Do you go at the professional ranks into some of those type of discussions?
Yes, I'm blessed with phenomenal leadership. On my team, phenomenal. Like I'm very lucky to have leaders and captains who are just made all the right stuff. But to that point, my job is to bring them together. So you need to have this unifying fabric.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember our first training camp, I'm like, holy shit, I'm a professional coach. And I've never been on the field with this kind of talent. And oh, by the way, they're looking at you.
Yeah.
You're the guy that's like, Tony Resch was there, which was great. And I had some good experience. But, I remember one of the very first things that I did was have a PowerPoint. And I'm not a tech, but I'm like, but that helped me organize my thoughts. It helped me, sort of ground us with, here's who we are. Mm-hmm. And it was, the beginning of this professional league. And I started with the 6 NHL logos, Rangers, Black.
Oh, the originals. Yeah.
The very originals. I'm like, fellas,
that's us.
This is like,
that's cool.
This logo, and then, so it brought attention to, this is what this logo means. This is how we're going to define it. And boom. And I still refer to that. That still helps me go, all right, and it evolves, but who do we want to be? What are, so I'm always a believer, teams are individual to a season.
Yeah.
Programs and organizations are, those things are consistent. Those, I look at that differently, because a team can have success, a team can have personality, but if an organization remains consistent in their values, then you can have sustained success. Then you can.
Do you have core values with the Archers, like Badge, or is it more?
It's understood. It's a championship culture.
Yeah.
Like it's known. The thing that at St. Andrews and at Drexel and at Princeton and at Episcopal, where I've been, like the we mentality has been consistent throughout.
Yeah.
And if you play, for me, guys will chuckle if somebody hears it, just play and be like, oh yeah, that's what, but they know what it means.
Yeah.
So that consistency, I think, over time, like that's been critical.
Yeah. And you've said it, and we've talked about it in different ways, but like just being you really don't have to think about it too much. I mean, you're just authentic to the way you are, and then that evolved into an unconsciously competent way of doing things. And then it's kind of like they know it's the championship culture. Do you think when this leadership group transitions at some point out in retirement, Maybe they are. I don't even know. I haven't followed it lately. Sorry. Is that going to be a new process for you? Or do you think it's established?
It'll be an iteration, like when, people won't know Marcus Holman and Will Manny and those guys who were originally played.
Yep.
There was that off season where like, okay, we're in transition now. There's going to be a leadership void. We've had consistency, and I don't need to go into Tom Schreiber, Ryan Ambler, but point being is, I can feel it now that we've got an older team who understands who we are, who we've been, but now there's this younger core it's the next group. And I'm spending time with that group more now in the off season because it's imminent that some of these older guys are going to move on. So I'm watering those plants that much more right now because their time is coming and they've been exposed to it, but now there's always that leadership vacuum that happens. So preparing them for their voice to fill it is by design.
Well, and I love that because you have a background in that. I mean, that's what you do in high school, right? I mean, people graduate.
Right.
You do in college, people graduate. So you always are thinking about who's the next group, and then how are you going to develop them as freshmen and sophomores? I mean, we've had conversations over the years where you would say, "Oh, no, he's a future captain." Like I see this even in a recruiting process. I see this one. I think he's going to develop into a future captain. So it is in your DNA to be thinking about, okay, who's leading and then who's next.
Yep.
So I'm going to just ask a little odd leadership question, and I don't want to dive too far into it, but this came up recently for me. And you said like that in their notebooks, I am a leader, right? Is there ever a time that you're a good follower? And when you say I'm a leader, is it different? I mean, it's obviously different for different people, but does that ever cross your mind when it's,
100%.
like leading sometimes is following, and if you have Tom Schreiber or somebody who's just off the charts?
100%. Like I feel like a strength of mine, and that may be back to your previous question, a young coach's mistake, thinking it's all my way, or I think I'm really good at listening.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my best attributes is realizing I need
Not to me, of course. You didn't listen very well to me. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
a good reason.
Yeah.
You have Tony Resch on staff, or you have guys around you, or honestly, it could be the lowest guy on the depth chart, and they have a perspective or something. So, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing where they're coming from, what they're thinking, what they're seeing, and asking them. They're like, "Wait, I'm being asked."
Yep.
Like, okay, then that values their opinion, but it makes me a better leader. So I follow a good leader is a follower.
Yep.
Like that's a great point. And taking the pulse constantly, because if you don't, you just don't know what your audience is thinking. You don't know what the people you're trying to lead are actually, what they're living and thinking at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Anthony and I one of the shows we're going to do at some point is just meeting your team where they are, meeting your individuals where they are. We can go a lot of different ways with that, but that's one thing we've talked about because of that. Now, with that, and I'm hogging all the questions, so
great.
Is your psychology degrees? You obviously, and your dad was
Director of guidance.
Yeah. So it's in your DNA, right? How much? I mean, was that by choice when you majored in that but how much does that, and take out your degrees. We know how the degrees can work, and you studied that, but obviously you have, strong interest, even as you talk and as you talk about, in reaching and talking to kids and valuing opinions. That's a huge part of a coach, right? I mean, is the psychology. It's just one thing that, as well as I know you over the years, and I knew your degrees, but like it jumps out to me that you have 2 psychology degrees as a coach, not, whatever, sports management, business, and not that you can't get them, but you chose to again study it in grad school.
Well, I'll start with, there was no way I was going to be a math major. There were limits, and my C+ in freshman year at Dartmouth in math was a clear indicator that there were some cognitive limits in what I could thrive in. But I've always been interested in what makes people tick and how they think. So the social psychology, the educational psychology, all that stuff was just, I love reading about it. I love learning about it. And then going back to school, for a grad degree, the school psych piece was more testing than I really kind of was interested in. But, there again, I did my thesis on, or whatever my final paper was on, how to help learning. It was basically how to help learning differences learn, how to help kids that learn differently. And just, it was a new, nobody had really done research. And I just tried I just was trying to pull in, what was out there to try to figure out how it might help me as a coach. I feel like I have some unique learning styles, and that I appreciated, but then helping others, and it was a pretty good paper, back in the day. I have learning from that helps me be a better coach.
That was the end of part 1. Join us next week when we do part 2. Thanks for watching the show today. I had a great time talking with Nick, as I always do. Hope you enjoyed it as well. Visit us on social media. Also, go to our website if you've got comments, questions, you want to call me an ugly name, thenickanthonyshow.com. There's a place to do it there. Give us your email address so you never miss an episode. Thank you very much. We'll see you next show.